somewhere outside of Wayhaven. Soft voices echo inside my head. I frown against the pounding that's beginning to beat a painful rhythm inside my skull. Blinking my eyes open, I squint them as I'm greeted by the cold, blinding glare of an artificial light, and also by a group of familiar faces. Nate, Adam, Farah, Morgan, and... Mom? I blink a couple of times, as though the image might be a mirage, but she's definitely there. She gives a bright smile, one that contrasts with the starkness of the room. Bright white walls sting against my blurry vision, and the drone of the fan light above is interspersed with the occasional beep of medical machines. The machines flank either side of the hospital bed I'm on. And yet, it's definitely not the hospital in Wayhaven. What happened? My voice comes out hoarse. I wince at the pain which courses through my limbs as I try to sit up further in the surprisingly comfy, if simple, bed. Nate places a gentle but firm hand on my shoulder. You shouldn't try to move yet. She's fine, Morgan says from behind the others, with a dismissive shake of her head. You're damn lucky she is, Rebecca growls at her, and my brows arch in surprise to see Morgan actually skulk away at her words. Do you remember what happened? Adam asks, stepping forward to join the others standing at the edge of the bed. I frown, trying to think past the pain radiating out of the top of my head. There was a fight? The fuzzy memories begin to clear. The attackers, they were sick. Even with the piercing headache, it's hard to forget the assailant's gray skin and milky eyes. I shudder at the remembered thought. And then it hits me. My eyes widen, and my gaze shoots up to Nate. You healed. I saw you heal. Ah, so you remember that part too, Rebecca says with a frown, stepping away with a sigh. The memory plays out like a movie in my head, a very clear, very vivid movie. The gash had been deep, bloodied, maybe not fatal, but definitely in need of stitches, and then it had just mended. I shake my head, though it's a bad idea as my vision blurs a little. I must have hit my head harder than I thought. What you saw was real, my mother says after a long, quiet moment. I'm not really sure what I saw, I reply, pursing my lips at the blurring memories, my mind apparently fighting between logic and what it remembers. If she's not sure, then let's just leave it, Morgan snaps. She receives a frown from Adam and turns away, slumping against the wall with a sour expression. Celeste's identity is known now. The agency has given her clearance to a certain level. She needs to be informed. There is a heavy tone of regret to Rebecca's words as she says them. I arch a brow. So, someone is finally going to tell me what's really going on? Nate chuckles softly. Yes. You know I work for the government, Rebecca begins, seeming almost hesitant to speak. I nod. But it's not just our government, she continues, glancing around at the others in the room. It's for all of them. All of them? I can't help but repeat the statement. It's a global organization, Nate explains. One that the world's governments all contribute to, but all try to pretend doesn't exist. Why? The questions just keep blurting out. Because we aren't meant to exist, Farah says, having gotten a lot closer without me noticing. I flinch at her sudden proximity, and the long smile on her face. I don't understand. Rebecca smiles, sitting on the bed next to me. The bed dips beneath her slight weight. I keep my gaze on hers while waiting for her to give some kind of explanation that will actually make sense. She straightens herself, keeping the small smile on her face. The goal of the agency is to deal with certain things that the general populace is unaware of, things people don't want to know about. To keep the things that go bump in the night to people's imaginations, Nate says, leaning against a counter and shoving his hands into his pockets. You know, the stuff that humans can't handle, Farah adds. I tense. Humans? There are many things in this world that are kept secret from the public, Rebecca says. But that secrecy is necessary, to protect the general populace and to protect our agents. The information is swirling like a blender in my head. Why to protect your agents? Because we're special, Farah says with a grin, leaning on the bed closer towards me. Adam yanks her back, the young agent almost stumbling into the wall behind. Enough, Farah. Farah gives a soft chuckle, one Morgan joins in with from the corner of the room. I turn to Rebecca, about ready to plead for a straight-up answer. She gives me one. They're vampires. The words replay about 100 times in the space of a second in my mind. They're vampires. My mind finally stops swirling enough for me to respond. I'm sorry, I blurt out. They're what now? Vampires, Nate repeats. It sounded ridiculous just hearing the word. Yeah, I reply. That's what I thought you said. Glancing about the room, I'm not sure what I expected to see. Adam's shoulders have tensed so much they are practically around his ears. Morgan and Farah are sitting to one side with smirks on their faces, and Nate's brows are pinched together in an uncertain frown. Nate eventually steps forward, breaking through the silence which is deafening the room. It's true. There is so much sincerity and honesty in the words that it's hard not to believe him, but vampires. Really? I stare over them, unable to hide my disbelief. You need proof? Morgan suddenly asks, and it sounds much more like a threat than an offer. She takes one stalked step forward before Adam holds out an arm to stop her. Don't bother, Adam says, his gaze shifting to me. If she doesn't believe it, then that's her problem. We're not here to perform for her sake. There is a sting of insult to those words, and I'm not sure why. How does he honestly expect me to believe something so unbelievable? Rebecca slides from the bed back onto her feet in a simple, graceful motion. Let me show you around our facility and try to explain a little further. She gestures to the darkened hallway beyond the door, and my heart makes a heavy thump in my chest. Outside the medical room. The facility we're now walking around in, after I got dressed into a boringly plain gray t-shirt and dark trousers, is located under the abandoned bank just outside of the big city, my mother tells me. There are agency facilities like this hidden throughout not just the country, but the whole world. I shake my head, unable to picture such a massive, complicated place built so close to the city, and no one has ever known about it. I can only show you some of the facility, Rebecca says as she leads me through another set of wide corridors. You haven't obtained full clearance for all of it. We move further into the bunker-like building. Tubular, concrete hallways line our path, the blandness of the place lifted only occasionally by a bright red or yellow pipe that clonks unnervingly, like someone is inside waiting to bang a hammer against it at just the right time to give me the most fright. Fluorescent lights hum from above in almost eerie whispers, making my mind flurry with ideas about what might lay behind the thick green steel doors latched to the walls at regular intervals. And I'm not sure if I should be concerned by the smoky burning smell that wafts out from under some of them. The whole thing looks like something out of a horror game, which isn't exactly helping to calm my nerves any. One of the doors is slightly ajar, and I find my steps faltering to a stop to stare inside. It looks like some kind of training room. Padded mats line the floor, a selection of exercise equipment is spread around the edge, and there are even a selection of blank-faced training dummies set up at one end. A man steps onto the mats, tall, toned, and obviously there to get training done, and stares at the other end of the room. Then, in a brilliant spark of light, the man appears before one of the dummies, and slices its head off with a simple flick of his wrist. I stare inside the room for the longest moment, unsure how to actually process the reality of the unbelievable display I just witnessed. I can't believe this is actually real. I breathe the words, unable to say much else through my tightening throat. I take a step away, only to bang into someone behind me. Spinning on the spot, I mumble out an apology, barely even paying attention. No problem, the woman replies, and makes to continue on down the corridor, but not before her eyes flash black. My eyes widen, and my gaze follows her as she continues down the hallway. Is that a tail? Rebecca steps up beside me, her hand coming to rest in comfort on my back. I know it must feel like your world has been turned upside down. Upside down? I scoff, taking a breath. Still, I am thankful for her comfort, the warmth of it helping to ease my nerves a little. That's quite the understatement. Her expression shifts into a pained frown before giving a smile. I'm here for you through this, as I always am. I fall back against the opposite wall for support, the cold concrete seeping through my clothes and making me shiver. My gaze finds the gap in the door once again. This time the man severs one of the dummies in half with what looks like a bone protrusion from his forearm. My confusion over this whole situation is not settling, and I shift my gaze down to the floor. This really is a lot to handle. The man inside the training room shifts into action again, catching my attention. Rebecca seems to notice where my gaze has fallen, and moves forward to gently close the door. That's Agent Fuller, she says. He's a vampire too? I ask, the question spilling out of me before I can stop it. No, she says with a soft chuckle. He's a demon. Oh, of course he's a demon, I reply, throwing my hands into the air. What was I thinking, confusing him with a vampire? She glances over at me. I think you're hyperventilating. Really? I bark, my breaths gasping in short pants. I wonder why the hell that could be. She steps in front of me, placing her hands firmly on my arms and making me stand a little straighter. Celeste, look at me. I do as ordered, just from the intensely commanding tone she uses. I didn't want to bring you into this world, but your life may be at risk. If it takes you knowing the truth to save you, then that is what I'll do. Her grip softens, her hands dropping away. I won't lose you. Staring over at her, I can see she really means it. Her face is drawn and pale, fear glinting in her eyes, and for once she looks older, tired. She suddenly faces me with a straight expression. There are things we still need to discuss. Follow me. Inside the facility's common room. So, how do you think our detective's taking the revelation? Farah asks, plopping down into one of the padded cotton armchairs. Morgan lets out a snigger, pushing herself onto a side table to sit. With how confused she was learning that we're vampires, I doubt the rest will go down so well. Farah looks over her shoulder to where Adam and Nate are standing together near the door. What about you two? Want to make a bet on how our detective does? Nate frowns deeply. We're not betting on the condition of a person who has just had their reality shattered. Geez, you're no fun, Farah replies with a heavy breath. What do you think will happen? Adam asks quietly, turning his back on the other two and focusing on Nate. Nate sighs. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure what the plan is for after Celeste has been told. Hopefully the agency will force her to stay in the facility so that we can get out there and actually do our job of catching this guy, he replies. Watching that detective is like keeping watch over a starved vampire who's just seen blood. That's rather overdramatic, don't you think? Nate chuckles. Personally, I've enjoyed working with the detective. It's been refreshing getting out into the world again. A world beyond the agency. Don't let the higher-ups hear you say that, Adam replies with a smirk. I can't imagine they would be too happy about one of their best agents wanting to break free. I wouldn't go that far. He shrugs. But working more within the human world isn't something I would object to. Adam lets out a disgusted scoff. I can't think of anything worse. Once again, we agree to disagree, my old friend, Nate says, clapping Adam on the back and giving a bright smile. The expression fades a little as their situation once again hits them. I guess we'll find out soon enough about the detective. Adam stiffens and gives a tense nod, turning to look at the door with a frown. In the facility cafeteria. Sitting in the empty cafeteria, I've managed to find most of my senses again, though my head still aches as it's stuffed to bursting with all of the new information. The boringness of the room matches the concrete corridors we had just left, a chill settling over me at the sheer size of it. Rows of perfectly straight canteen tables line the room, and the empty seats can't help but make me wonder how many people, that is, how many creatures are in the facility. More artificial light pours down from above, with not a single window in sight. Even in the vastness of the room, it feels suddenly very constricting. At least it doesn't smell like smoke anymore. Just disinfectant and cleanliness. Overly clean. Like everything natural about this place has been stripped and wiped away. Suddenly I want the burning scent back. Here you go, Rebecca says, sliding a mug of hot chocolate in front of me across the beige plastic table. I grip the cup and take a sip, knowing the sugar will help with the shock. It's obviously something Rebecca knows too, and I can't help but wonder if it was something she'd needed when she found out about all of this for the first time. She shuffles onto the bench opposite me, leaning her elbows on the table and sipping at her own drink. Steam curls from the mug, dancing in front of her closed eyes and into her bright red hair. It's strange to see her so at ease. Apparently my learning the secret has lifted an extreme weight from her mind. I remember what it was like to be told about all of this, she begins, placing down her mug but still staring into it. How all of the nightmares from books and movies and our fears are real. And that they're working for our governments, let's not forget that part, I reply, sipping at the chocolate. The hot liquid burns against my throat, but it's enough to help shock some feeling back into my limbs. They don't work for the governments, they work for the agency. She flicks her gaze up to mine. And if they didn't work here, what do you think they'd be doing? I shudder to think. I don't want to know. Well, unfortunately, you're going to have to. She shifts further forward on the bench, her voice echoing from the concrete walls. There are some supernatural beings who don't want to comply with the treaties. Treaties? I interrupt her with the question so fast my drink almost spills over my lips. Rebecca passes me a napkin, tutting at me in the exact same manner she used to when I was young and spilt food down my front. The treaties are pacts, she explains, signed between the agency and supernaturals. They're updated and signed at regular intervals to keep them up to date with our fast-changing world. She grips her mug tighter. Most supernaturals aren't from our world, but they manage to find their way here through cracks between dimensions. And once they're here, they can't get back. The treaties detail the terms by which each species can remain in this world and be under the agency's protection and guidance. We protect humanity from supernaturals, but we also protect supernaturals from humanity. Aren't from our world? It's about the only thing I caught from that speech. No, they are from an alternate dimension. She takes a deep breath. The Echo world. It's very similar to our own, but in some ways extremely different. And by extremely different, you obviously mean full of supernatural creatures. Sarcasm laces the words, but an uncertainty also tugs at my voice too. Yes, she replies bluntly. There are some supernaturals who don't agree with the terms, and it's also the agency's duty to enforce the rules and hunt down those who don't comply. She shifts slightly. Most of our field agent teams are made up of supernaturals. Normal humans just don't have the ability or strength to take down those supernaturals who go rogue. I take a gulp of my drink. What happens to them, the rogue supernaturals, when you catch them? Her lips purse, and her grip wraps around her mug so tightly I worry the cup might break. The punishment is not a kind one. You kill them? I ask, a brow arched. She moves her gaze up slowly to mine, sympathy in her eyes. That would be a kindness. She suddenly stands from the bench and gestures for me to follow once again. Back in the facility's corridors. It feels like Rebecca and I have been walking for hours before we finally draw to a stop. We are in front of a pair of thick, green steel doors that blockade the entirety of this section of hallway. 2 guards stand either side, clad in dark gray combat gear and heavy chainmail vests. 3 electronic panels line the wall behind them. The guards stiffen on seeing Rebecca approach, and I can't help but arch my brows in surprise to their tense response to her presence. Then their attention flicks to me, hands reaching towards the batons holstered on their thighs. She's with me, my mother states, and the guards give a nod of reply and instantly relax. Rebecca proceeds to press her thumb against one of the panels, then bends down to the next to scan her eye, and finally presses a selection of odd-looking symbols on the last one. A loud horn echoes throughout the corridor, a red light flashing overhead before the doors make a hissing noise. They begin to swing open slowly. Rebecca tenses, staring ahead as the doors continue to open. I'm not sure you should be seeing this, but I need you to understand the importance of what we do here, and the seriousness of it. We continue on down yet another corridor. It's cold. White clouds of breath form in the air in front of my lips, and the chill sinks into my skin as deep as the shadows outside the pools of pallid light that illuminate our way. Turning a corner, Rebecca draws to a stop. This is the punishment for those who go rogue. I stumble to a halt, staring over the scene before me. On either side of me, stretching for as far as I can see before more corridors split away, are rows of glass-fronted cells. Inside each cell is a white-tiled room. A metal tube protrudes down from the ceiling, and a plume of sickly yellow vapor pours from the bottom. Huddled on the floors of these cages are a variety of creatures, some human-looking, others not even close. Each one of their bodies and faces is contorted into a frozen state of fear. Eyes wide, fingers or claws grasped into fists, mouths held open in silent screams. I stumble forwards, my footsteps echoing from the floor and seeming to ripple from the glass in thudding waves. Or that could just be the intense beat of my heart drumming in my chest and ears. Speeding my steps, I move to walk closer beside Rebecca, feeling slightly better with her presence so close beside me. I notice a small smile on her lips, but it shifts from her expression quickly. What's wrong with them? I finally ask. Rebecca steps close to one of the cells and stares inside, remorse and sympathy tugging at the frown on her brow. It's called caging. It's a punishment that was designed by the supernaturals themselves when the agency was first formed. She gestures to the metal tube in the ceiling. This releases a toxin which traps the prisoner inside their own mind. It makes their worst fears and memories a reality to relive inside their heads, and cages them in a state of paralysis. It's difficult to keep my gut reaction to this contained. You're right, I say, swallowing hard. Killing them would be a kindness. My gaze falls on a paralyzed creature in the cage beside me, a row of scales lining their back all the way down to a tail which extends out from a spiked spine. They're spread on their side, clutching their knees to their chest and rocking, biting down on their lower lip so hard that a dribble of blue blood has pooled beneath their head. I don't like what we have to do, but trust me when I say this is the only way. If we didn't do this, then all these rogue supernaturals would likely be able to escape our facility. Some of them possess abilities and strength far beyond what we can contain by normal means. Rebecca steps up to the cell I am staring into. That creature has killed 12 people and countless supernaturals. I flinch a little at this news. They used acid to melt the skin from their victims before eating them, usually while the victim was still alive. My stomach reels at the imagery forced into my head, and I glance away from the cell. The supernaturals in our world don't need to kill to survive. The agency's job is also to provide food, shelter, and aid to all supernaturals who obey the rules. We help them acclimatize to our world. She nods her head at the cell, her expression hardening a little. That supernatural had the opportunity, but they chose a different path, and they knew the consequences that breaking the laws would bring. Ma'am? A voice interrupts the seriousness of the conversation. We both turn to look behind us where one of the guards is standing. Yes, Rebecca replies in a stiff tone. The guard shifts uneasily. We have a prisoner transfer soon. Of course, she replies. We were leaving now anyway. And with a final glance towards me, she heads back towards the exit. I follow a few paces behind. Outside the facility's common room. Uncertainty stalks me down the corridors as we head back through the facility. The hallway is too silent, too empty, to feel wholly at ease. My mind is still reeling from everything that I've learned and seen. It's not exactly something I can deal with in the space of a couple of hours. I almost bang into Rebecca as she comes to a stop outside of a slightly more battered green metal door. This is the common room, she says. If you wait here for a while, I'll have a guest room sorted out for your stay here. My stay? I ask. You took quite a nasty bump to the head, she replies, her worried gaze flickering up to the bandage that's wrapped around the top of my head. We need to keep an eye on you for a while. You'll also need to be debriefed further about the true details of the case you're working on. At least I finally get to find out the truth about all of that. What about my work? The station? That's all taken care of. Don't worry, she replies with a small smile. Then the expression falters, and she frowns. I am truly sorry about all of this. Finally, the overwhelming thoughts inside my head break, and I can only focus on my mother and the realization of how she kept this a secret from me. I suppose now I know why you're away so much, I reply, my words heavy in my mouth. She nods. It doesn't make up for my absences, but I hope it will help explain them. And maybe it will help us move forward together? I glance over at her with an uncertain frown, unsure how to respond to that. There are way too many raw emotions swirling around my chest to even start thinking of an answer. She gives a final nod. I'll have someone come find you when your room is ready. I watch her go, feeling suddenly a little calmer as I do. Shaking the moment away, I grip the door handle and shove it open, heading inside. The common room is full of warmth, especially compared to the rest of the facility, like stepping into a log cabin after hiking through snow. Worn leather sofas dot the open space, partnered with burgundy velvet armchairs that have just the right amount of wear to them to make them seem homey rather than outdated. Intricately patterned rugs cover a polished wood floor, and even the concrete walls have been given a wash of cream paint. Bookcases add a sort of regal quality to it all. Even the empty pool table at the far end seems suited to the room. It's also brighter than any place I've been here so far. An ornate ceiling light glows with an orange hue, and there are a couple of table lamps dotted about. There's even an attempt at some nature, with a few lush green, frill-leafed ferns spilling out of some terracotta pots on shelves. The heady scent of frankincense pours from an incense stick, smoking away on the nearby side table. It's a more welcoming space than any I've seen so far. Well, maybe except for the 4 vampires staring expectantly at me. Unit Bravo remains silent as they look over me. Farah is sprawled over a rather fancy-looking armchair near a brass-colored radiator. Morgan is perched on a mahogany side table, only just avoiding knocking off a tassel-edged table lamp. Nate is propped against the wall on the opposite side with his hands in his pockets, and Adam is inspecting me with an arched brow from his place leaning against the back of a tall-backed recliner. So, Farah says, a long smile beginning to form on her face. Still confused about the whole us being vampires thing? Morgan gives a snigger of laughter at the comment. Nate gives a disapproving tut, then steps forward towards me with a soft smile. It gets easier. Maybe this whole situation would have been easier if you'd just told me everything from the start, I bark, a hand on my hip. Why would we do that? Morgan asks. We had our own mission, one that didn't involve solving your murders. We didn't have to tell you shit. I stumble on a response, frowning. This case... There is no case, Farah says. Not really. Just our job to protect you from the bad guy. My hand falls back to my side as everything just gets more and more confusing. A knock interrupts the conversation, the door creaking open to reveal a woman dressed in the same garb as the other guards I'd seen. Your room is ready, Detective DeWolf, she says, the words pronounced with an Indian accent. I nod, more than ready for some sleep. My mind and body are beyond exhausted, and I wouldn't be surprised if I don't surface from bed for a week at this rate. Moving towards the door, I glance to the side as Nate steps up close and holds it open for me. You shouldn't blame your mother for how all of this went down, he says, a concerned frown tightening his features. He obviously heard our discussion. She's a good agent, he continues, loyal to the agency and its rules. I know her well enough to know there must have been many times when it's killed her not to tell you about all of this. She loves you very much. I don't blame her, I reply, looking towards him. It's just so much to take in. I don't really know how to handle it right now. Of course, Nate replies. All of this is bound to take some time to sink in. Yeah, just a bit. Shaking my head, I throw him a half smile before leaving to follow the guard down the hall. The next morning. The guest room had been functional, if a little dreary. At least the bed had been comfortable enough. Getting to sleep had been pretty easy. I was almost out as soon as my head hit the pillow. After everything I'd learned, and realizing how much bigger the world is than I ever thought, I was beyond exhausted. I'd eventually been woken up by a guard who told me Rebecca had requested I meet her in one of the medical rooms. So, here I am, sitting on a hospital bed and staring over my mother and her team of vampires. It's certainly a different start to my usual day. I think proper introductions are in order, Rebecca says suddenly, breaking the uncertain silence which had hung around us all for the last 5 minutes. She steps up towards Farah first, who is, as usual, spread with legs and arms dangling over a nearby chair. Agent Farah Hoville, newest member of the Unit Bravo and our reconnaissance and infiltrations expert. Farah grins brightly. And a vampire, don't forget that. Rebecca throws her a glare, then moves towards Morgan. Specialist Agent Morgan. No surname follows. Morgan makes no move except to let the cigarette in her mouth drop a little, a flurry of smoke streaming like a veil in front of her face. Morgan is our interrogations expert, Rebecca explains. It's her warm, open personality that just makes everyone want to spill their secrets to her, Farah says with a quiet chuckle. Morgan's sensory and pheromone abilities are much more powerful than most vampires, Rebecca explains, though I note the hesitation in her voice, and also the frown that hits Farah's face at the words. Rebecca doesn't give me a chance to inquire about just exactly what that means before she turns to Nate. Agent Nathaniel Sewell. He smiles. Nate is still just fine. Rebecca places a hand on his arm. Nate is second in command of this unit and also our research and information expert. I nod, easily picturing him hunched over a desk, poring over books and files while scribbling out notes. Though he is quite obviously strong and tall, he doesn't seem the type who would get into a fight unless pushed, at least from what I've seen of him so far. And of course, Commanding Agent Adam Dumortin. Rebecca turns her focus to him and I stare over at the team leader, the usual frown set on his brow. Adam commands the unit, but is also our combat expert. No surprise there, then. I keep that thought to myself. The room falls quiet once again. I realize that, as the introductions are over, they are waiting for me to respond. And I'm Detective Celeste Wolf, I say in introduction. Ordinary human. Nate's jaw tightens. Not exactly ordinary. At first I think he's just being nice, but when everyone's focus flicks towards me, I realize there must be a deeper meaning to his words. Your blood, Rebecca begins, running a hand through her hair. It's special. My blood? I repeat. Why? We're not entirely sure, Nate replies. My mother takes a step towards me. But now that you know everything, we hoped we could use this opportunity to find out. How? We'd like to run some tests. It's hard not to tense at the words. It's only blood tests, physical tests, just that kind of thing, Nate explains, seeming to sense my uncertainty. I frown and shake my head. Is there something wrong with my blood? There's nothing wrong with it, Adam suddenly says, and it's the first time I've heard him speak since the day before. In fact, it's unique. You possess, what we can only guess for now, some sort of evolved hormone or mutation, Nate explains. It renders you immune to a vampire's pheromone abilities. Farah scoffs. Yeah, we can't even use ours on you. She quickly snaps up her hands in defense when Rebecca arches a brow in her direction. Not that we would have tried. It's hard to straighten out all the confusion in my head, but one thing becomes plainly clear. The killer in Wayhaven isn't just some ordinary psycho, is he? I ask. Nate shakes his head. No, he's a vampire. I glance over them. Like you? Nothing like us, Adam retorts, as though the question had been ridiculous to ask. He pushes himself off the wall. We aren't killers. Well, that's somewhat reassuring at least, I reply, letting out a long breath. Adam curves a brow in surprise, quickly turning away, though I notice Nate crack a smile. Thankfully, Rebecca speaks again to interrupt the oncoming quiet. The killer in Wayhaven, currently using the alias Murphy, has you pinned as his next target. I sent my team in to protect you and keep you away from him. She pinches the bridge of her nose. But you're rather more persistent than even I could have anticipated. I'm not sure whether to take that as a compliment or not. If he's after me, then why did he kill those other people? I suddenly realize that all of the weird blood Verta found suddenly makes so much more sense. Some of them had the mutation as well, she continues. We don't know why he's after people with the mutation or what he's trying to accomplish, Nate explains. He seems to be running some kind of experiment on the victims, Adam says, not looking at me as he speaks. We're not sure why. His victims would be immune to his powers, so they'd be more difficult for him to acquire. I shudder at the choice of word. He's not doing a very good job on those experiments unless death is what he wants, I reply, uncertain how to handle yet another truckload of bizarre information. At least focusing on the case has calmed my thoughts on the whole vampire thing for the moment. Adam shakes his head. We don't think death is the intended result. And whatever he's trying, Farah chimes in, he's pretty much run out of test subjects. Rebecca turns to meet my eyes, her lips drawn tight in worry. From what we can find, we think you are the last one with the blood type he's after. They all stare at me closely for a long moment, waiting while I process that information. At least I might actually be able to do my job now that I know everything, I say, my words sharp. Your job can only be helped if you'll work with us, Celeste, my mother says, sitting on the end of the bed. We won't let him hurt you. A nice sentiment, but I'm not sure how much words are really going to help. So, do you agree to the tests? Adam asks bluntly. It could help narrow down why he wants you so badly. This new world I've been plunged into might be a little clearer if I can at least know what's happening with my blood, and possibly why Murphy wants it. But then, I still don't know much about this agency or what their plans are. Who knows what they want from the results of these tests? I guess I'll have to go with my instincts. I suppose it would be best, I reply, and give a decisive nod. I'll do them. I'm kind of interested to know what the results might be myself. They all look relieved at my response. This is the first real chance to find out about this mutation, Rebecca says with a genuine smile. You'll be helping us all so much. Now, come with me. I'll take you to the lab. Sliding from the bed, I make to follow my mother, suddenly very aware of the gazes of Unit Bravo watching me as I go.